recording. This is the July Mid-Career Lab open Q&A call, and we're doing something very different today, which a couple of people have asked for in the past, and they've asked for a couple of things. One is more recruiters to get an idea of what recruiters are about, particularly for this age cohort and career stage cohort, but also younger people. Why don't we talk to more younger people? So for better or worse, Carly, you may regret this. Carly Weitz, who was actually introduced to me by our fellow call member here, Jim Lombardi. I'm not sure where he is on your screen. But the connection there is that Carly, as you may have seen in the, someone.
I think Sonia needs to be muted.
Someone needs to mute. Carly kind of went to school in the food science space, which then got her into, and I'll let her tell the story with more panache, got her into the staffing and recruiting space in the food industry. And Jim is a renowned chef and food industry business guy. So that's where they met. And in a conversation that Jim and I were having about the call and about how we might spice it up and go in different directions, he suggested that we bring Carly on. So if it goes south, Jim, I'm not going to blame you, but I don't think it's going to go south because I think Carly is great. And Carly, just kind of jump in if you would and introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about you, and we'll just kind of get into some questions about recruiting in general, Gen Z in particular, older candidates in particular, et cetera.
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me on, and it's great to see everyone on the Zoom. My name is Carly Weitz. I was in recruiting for about 2.5 years. As John did mention, I was a graduate from food science and packaging, so I went directly into that field. Unfortunately, I have a lot of food allergies, so I was terminated. So I've been through that walk of life before. And then immediately fell into recruiting very backwards. Like nobody plans to go into that. I can kind of elaborate on that, but once you're in it, you're hustling, bustling, kind of running a race with everyone else. So very exciting career to have. I did actually step down from that role just for personal reasons, but I am sitting in Los Angeles. I do a lot of surfing. I'm local to the area, grew up here, and just am very happy to be here. So I'm happy to answer any kind of questions you guys have. I do have a good general outline for what everybody's looking for. Just so you guys know what I have done in the past, I started in HR, I started in manufacturing, specifically on the food side. So we were building out teams in food companies. Think of everyone from a dishwasher and maintenance person all the way up to a director of HR or VP of quality. So that's how Jim and I actually overlapped paths. I was filling a role over in Kentucky. We talked about that for a little bit, and then everything kind of went from there.
Great. So you were talking about something very intriguing that you kind of let slip by, is that everyone just kind of falls into recruiting. So talk a little bit more about that, about where recruiters come from.
First of all, do I have any recruiters on the call?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we're safe.
Okay, cool. No one grows up, of course, saying, I want to staff a job, right? That's kind of something that not a lot of people know about, know how to do. Everyone who I worked with a company that had 200 recruiters nationwide. We were in 35 different states. No one ever said that their career aspiration was to be a recruiter, but once you're kind of in the thick of it, you really do start to like it. Every single day I talked to different people. There was no sense of routine, which was great for me. Some people may dislike that aspect, but every single day, different call you're having, different person you're talking to, but you are filling the same role every day. So it's kind of a drop of a hat sort of job where nothing is planned, nothing is the same. You may get a call from one of your candidates that they're going to quit their job. You just don't know what's going to happen that day. So a lot of people go into it with psychology degrees. A lot of people start there if they want their HR career. A lot of people start there if they want to do sales, but they're not sure what kind of sales they want to do if they don't want to do software sales. So it's kind of a whole mix up of people with different backgrounds, but that's what makes it so much fun.
Do people, I mean, I'm sure obviously there are people who do this for a career who make it their career, but is there a certain amount of churn within the recruiter community, kind of people going in, staying for a while, either finding another passion or on the other side, maybe burning out.
Sure. So a perfect example of that is myself. And I'll kind of talk about that in a second. But starting with where I was, the rule of thumb is by 3 months, you'll know if that person's going to be good at their job. By 6 months, you'll know if they like their job. And by a year, you'll know if they want to do this forever. So that was kind of the unspoken truth of where I was. In recruiting, there's two different aspects to it. So there's in-house and then there's agency. In-house would be someone who works directly with a company, and an agency would be someone who's a third-party vendor just staffing jobs that that company has open once every week or something. I was in an agency, so we worked with 50 different clients at once. We worked 50 different jobs at once. We may have 2 jobs with one client, 2 jobs with someone else, but it was just, you know, a whole collection of jobs there and different personalities, different people who you worked with. I left the space, unfortunately. So we had kind of something interesting happen where, because we were multinational, we were a satellite office in LA. And with that, everyone became remote. I don't know what everyone's take on a remote workforce is. Some people love it, some people really don't like it. But at the age that I was at, and just being so junior in a career, I did want something where I could go into an office. And that's, you know, another conversation to have down the line with people. But we see every single day, people want something and then people don't want something. So, you know, I was just a good example of being burnt out from that specific situation. I was there for about 2.5 years, so I definitely passed I liked that mark, but I liked the career, I was good at the career, but then at the same time, there's another aspect to that of working 12, 14-hour days, just kind of on the phone with people every single day. So there's a lot of stress in that job, but I loved it. And I'm more than happy to elaborate on anything specific that anyone has.
I've got a few more questions, then I want to open it up. But one of the questions that has come up on this call before from some people is to advise candidates to understand or somehow inquire or find out whether or not the recruiter is being paid a salary, kind of a retained search situation, or whether they are on commission, and how does that affect the relationship that they have with the candidate, their view of the candidate, their view of the process overall.
Sure. So every recruiter is going to be on a different salary. Some may be on 1099, which is only commission. Some may be on a base plus commission split. So of course, at the end of the day, everyone is trying to fill the job regardless of what their base pay is. However, there are searches that are retained, and that's going to be per client, per company. I never have worked a retained search. That was not in my wheelhouse. But of course, if a retained search did come through, it's kind of drop everything. And that's the biggest thing to focus on because the money is already there. So I don't think it has to do with, I can't say that there's a correlation with the job and the candidate on that side. I think it's just luck when it comes to what kind of role you speak with a recruiter about. And I'm sorry that it's such an open-ended answer on that side, but it's just very, at the end of the day, the job has to be filled. So that's kind of the best way to look at that. And that's my personal take on it.
Right. Well, that kind of segues into the next question, which gets into the heart of the ageism, mid-career, career stage question, and the sense that older candidates have that the deck is stacked against them, that the recruiter community overall is younger, that there is less of appreciation, whether it's amongst recruiters themselves or the hiring managers that they're working for. There is a disconnect regarding older candidates. Did you find that to be the case?
Transparently, yes. Not up to my judgment, of course. You know, a client would come to us with a need, and we're not just going to throw as many resumes at the wall as we can. We are trying to find the one person that they want who's going to be above and beyond their expectations and skill sets of what they need. So on the positive side, we are seeing an older retirement age. We are seeing a more seasoned workforce stay in the workforce at this point. I don't think that has to do with age. I think that just has to do with the skill set. So really the way that people are selling themselves on those calls. On top of that, there's a lot of other factors than just age, right? So for example, I worked maintenance technician roles. They needed people who didn't have any injuries in the past. And unfortunately, you know, there's kind of a percentage of people who above the age of a certain amount do have health concerns that we had to know about. So it's never a question that I was able to ask. This was always information that was brought forward. And I do think that the transparency aspect was needed. However, you don't want someone who's going to hurt themselves in the line of work. And that was something that happens on the maintenance side, of course. However, you get into something more business oriented, something more skill set focused, and that's going to be heavier, where I don't think that there's much of a disconnect on that side. When it comes to recruiters dismissing certain things, again, it's going to come down to the job itself and what the client has asked for. If someone's asking for 5 years of experience, they're going to look for someone with 4 to 6 years of experience. They're not going to look for someone with 15 years of experience, unfortunately. And it's just that we are seeing that push towards, we want exactly what we've asked for, and not a whole lot of flexibility when it comes to what a client is going to pay somebody for.
So it really is on the employer side. You're kind of taking your cue from the employer, from the hiring manager, from the job description, and that's what's going to guide and motivate the way you search.
Correct. And I always was the kind of recruiter who would send, a collection of 3 resumes. I'd send someone junior, I'd send someone who they wanted, and I'd send someone seasoned, and you let them decide from there, right? You kind of take the hint after the first time. Of course, this wasn't just, oh, here, good luck, read these, tell me what you think. It was based on what we did screen for, but you never know what a client wants until they say no or yes to something. So you have to let that be up to them, and that's kind of where we were with that. Of course, we had to have control over both parties and see where we could best provide value, whether that be with someone who's seasoned or junior, or exact amount of years that they wanted, but that is very much dependent on who the employer is.
So one more question before I throw it open to the group, and that is, in your experience, do employers know what they want?
Oh my God. I'm sure everyone here has been on any kind of, staffing. You've had to hire someone, you've had to train someone, you've had to see how someone works after 30 days. Unfortunately, employers know what they want. If money didn't exist, if people didn't negotiate, if candidates didn't have a life outside of work, but then of course there's all of these other hurdles that come with that. So there are going to be clients who are very straight with what they want, but that may not be in the market.
Well, I guess my question is really about, do employers, hiring managers, really understand the jobs that they're trying to fill? And when they, I like to say that certainly in my experience as an executive, the last thing you want to do is write a job description. Hiring a piece of person power is the last thing you want to deal with over the course of your day. So it's a squeeze, and you're not really trained at that. And just reading a post, of kind of a misery post on LinkedIn this morning about a woman who went into an interview with a younger recruiter at a company, or a hiring manager who was inexperienced and was just told to hire someone, and just kind of left to dangle, and had no experience hiring anyone. It was the first time she'd ever been asked to hire someone, had no idea what to ask in the interview, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where I'm going with this, is that, will employers say, well, here's the job description, but it's kind of half baked, and then you begin to understand when they're reacting to the candidates that you're putting forward, that they kind of don't know what they want. I mean, did you encounter this? And is this rare? Is this widespread? What's going on?
It's everywhere. Even if they know what they want, the job description may not match that, right? So as I'm saying, people can have an idea and an expectation, and that's kind of where a recruiter would come in and try and get down to the nitty gritty of what they actually want. So we're not asking on the call anything besides what kind of culture fit you want, how many years of experience, what's the salary flexibility, everything like that. And from there, we can, gauge the emotional intelligence aspect of both sides of who's hiring and who's accepting a job and who's going to actually take the job. Something that we also ran into, and I'll just kind of use as an example, but we worked with a wine startup. They were based in LA. They super cool product. I mean, I would have bought it if I were at Hollywood Bowl or something like that. But they were trying to find a salesperson who could break into all of these large venues. And we could screen for that as much as we want, but never once were we told, oh, we want this person to come from this school. We want this person to have this color hair. You know, there are so many other things that we're not allowed to ask that we would never have known that they wanted. So we went through, I want to say 25 candidates to say, okay, you guys still don't know what you want, or you're not expressing what you want on that side. So there was that aspect of all of these people could do this job. We have so many people who could do this job, who could break in, who have the connections, but they're not hitting your expectations, and we still don't know what that is because they didn't have a clear definition of what that was.
Okay. I'm sure other people have either experiences to share, questions to ask. Please jump in. That's what this call is for. Don't be shy.
Sure, I have a question. As
Yes.
far as resume and how far back to go. I mean, if I go back to my, as far as I'm going back like 20 years, maybe. I mean, I could go back to 1990. And so I haven't done that certainly. And certainly what's more relevant and what I'd be, you know, kind of able, my qualifications for the work. Do you have any guidance on how far back? Or I have some work early on in my career that sometimes would be something I put forward for some of the positions I'm looking at. I don't know what, as far as ageism and also just standard practice.
Sure. Very good question. So thank you for asking that. And I actually meant to speak on this earlier, but something that we do look for is the hoppiness and the jumpiness of a candidate on top of the years. So if you have a job every year, that's not going to look great. So sometimes what we suggest, especially with the kind of seasoned aspect, and I can't use certain words, I'm sorry. So I'm just trying to think of other ones. But we always say to go back about 10 years and then from there summarize what you did before that. So I recently helped someone who had, 20 different administrative jobs, but it was because she was moving every 6 months because her husband was in the military, something like that. So we would just kind of summarize that and just say 2005 to present, administrative manager, all of the companies that she worked for, all of her responsibilities under. So it sort of is like, yes, exactly, a summarized aspect of what they're looking for. If you have, let's just say you're trying to get into Kellogg's, but you've worked with General Mills in the past, you've worked with Pillsbury in the past, you're going to want to emphasize things like that. And that's kind of where you do have to tailor your resume per job. So I don't care if you worked at a grocery store in high school, right? That is irrelevant information. We are looking for candidates that have very specific experience. So if you have experience with those companies, I would emphasize that. And if it isn't within 10, 15 years, probably summarize that at the bottom. But you do need to say prior experience upon request or prior experience and list it.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
That does. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
You're also saying that you want to be able to put some context in there. So for example, the woman who was changing jobs every 6 months, well, it wasn't because she was getting fired or she was antsy, it's because she was moving, right? So employers need to know that context around why you've got a gap in your resume or why you made these moves or what the value was of the search that you were on, et cetera.
Correct. Yeah. And again, we just tried to keep it as simple as possible with her. And that's great that you worked at, X, Y, and Z company, but we are looking for just the experience that you have right now.
Right. Sandy in the chat mentioned generally best to avoid adjectives. Sandy, what do you mean by that?
Subjectivity. You don't want to put anybody and somebody make a judgment call that means one thing to one person and a different thing to another. You don't want to say like seasoned. You want to say 20 plus. You want to be specific, that kind of thing.
Correct.
So
on the resume.
Right. So it's the choice of adjectives. It's not that you shouldn't use adjectives. It's just that you have to be careful about what you say or how you put it.
Well, and if anything, kind of subjectivity. I've seen some resumes where they say like dynamic individual or, just that kind of thing.
Right. Well, there's a lot of word salad that goes on,
Yeah,
right?
it's
A lot of
word-
corporate speak that you want to avoid. Right, so that doesn't sound like everyone else's standard summary, right?
Yeah,
Great.
we see a lot of summaries on there that say, started my career in 1975. And it's, you know, you graduated high school in 1975. You didn't start your actual career in 1975. So it's, again, I think that that's great advice, Sandy, of really working on how you frame something like that and really keeping it experience rich.
Great. Other questions? Experiences? Anyone want to kind of share a really positive experience with a recruiter or a nightmare experience with a recruiter? Everyone's,
This is not recruiter, but this is industry specific.
yeah.
In terms of knowing what you want. And in the 80s, I wrote, back when industrial shows used to exist. And I always had to work, thank God, through a producer because the client did not know what the heck they wanted. So I needed a third person to like kind of filter that out because every show would have to have a theme, like the baseball or whatever, you're winning or what, you know, that sort of thing, like or Halloween or just theme. And so you have to know what specifically you want within that.
So that goes to industry knowledge and particular experience in a given role, right? Is that what
Well, a
you're,
lot of them are like for sales, there's celebrating sales and they want to have something thematic and memorable. And then because it's an industrial show, it has to be some kind of a, you know, there's a book out there, it costs like $60. It's like Bathrooms Over Broadway. And it, I mean, there are Broadway shows and they're very good music, but they're about my bathroom. It's just like most of, they don't exist anymore, but they did. They were a big deal back in the day.
okay. What else?
What are ways you
Yes,
can
thank you.
overcome employer expectations when you find somebody you think is a good select candidate?
From whose
When
perspective?
you find a candidate that you're hot on, there's a couple of barriers, including ageism. How do you deal with that?
So
They're
standard
very-
practice, yeah.
They're very experienced.
In
Okay.
other words, is it possible to if you in your judgment feel that a candidate is being overlooked for whatever reason, particularly age, is there a way for you to push back, to demonstrate the value? Do you do it? Do recruiters do it? You know, to what extent is a recruiter able to advocate for a candidate that they feel is special and should be given consideration?
Okay, well, my favorite answer, good recruiters will do that. There are a few bad ones who will just say, okay, cool, moving on. But the good ones will obviously be your advocate. And that's kind of where the positive relationship with a recruiter comes in. So having that person to hold your hand to advocate for you, that's where we do add the most value. I had so many clients who would want something and we'd find something that was, 99% of what they wanted, but that 1% was a want, not a need for the job. And that's where we would go ahead and stand up to these clients and say, hey, this person is seasoned, but they're one of the most, responsible people. I text them any hour of the day and they're immediate to call me back. They don't even just say like, okay, they want this job. So there's ways to do that with clients. And again, it's going to come down to what the job is, what the client actually wants, the relationship that recruiter has with the client. You do want to make sure that your recruiter has a good relationship with their client. And it's not just, okay, we're just going to fill this role and move on. The longevity of these clients is going to be one thing. Any client that we got that the feedback seemed didn't like them, thanks, next, that's not feedback, right? So you want your recruiter to push back for more. You want the recruiter to get the full story. You want every aspect of your job search to be transparent. And that comes down to how much you tell your recruiter, how much your recruiter tells you, the relationship the recruiter and the client have. And I do think that there is a very easy way to push back on a client. It just depends on the type of recruiter that you are working with.
What are some of the questions that candidates can ask recruiters to determine what kind of recruiter they are, whether they're going to go to bat for them, whether they actually are impressed or inspired by their candidacy? How can candidates do a better job of sussing out whom they're dealing with here in the process and mitigating any negatives in that relationship?
I have to kind of think on this for a second, but I think one of the first things that we all have experienced, including myself, is you work with a recruiter and then you feel like they never email you back. You feel like you're waiting for an answer for weeks from them, and now you don't have a job, or now you've heard back from another company that you're not as excited about as the opportunity that was pitched. And I mean, that's one way to find out, right? So how responsive they are and how interested in your success they will be. One of the most important questions I always would tell candidates of mine to ask at the end of any interview, and this can go for recruiters too, is, are there concerns about my background that we haven't discussed? Is there any, do you want me to follow up in 2 days? You know, so you kind of have to take that initiative, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, the reality is I talked to 55 people today. I'm going to talk to 55 tomorrow. I'm going to talk to 55 the next day. I forgot to send the email that said they're not, or I forgot to give you the call that they're not interested. Like, there are things that happen, slip of the mind, and that's, you know, one thing that we can't take personally as candidates or as recruiters. But the other aspect is really being invested in that candidate success. If you're hearing from your recruiter every week, hey, just wanted to check in, say hi, hope all is well, that's a good recruiter. People do want to keep these relationships regardless of what the candidate's success future is on that side.
Yeah. Katie, can you mute your mic? Thanks. So that brings up a question around ongoing relationships. How do you know whether to pursue an ongoing relationship with a recruiter that you've just encountered on this role, whether you get it or not? How do you know that this is someone who could be in your corner, could be filing you away, not just into a circular file, but into an active candidate file where they're going to continue to bring you up to other positions?
The first thing I want to say is you will know if you're not moving forward with a recruiter. I feel like there's a very huge shift in tone. There's kind of this lack of response, very blunt type of email that you'll get. So for example, we could not offer roles to people who required sponsorship now or in the future. That was just kind of general practice with a lot of our clients in the US. And of course,
visa sponsorship.
Visa sponsorship, yes. And of course, those people kept popping up in the email, could not take no for an answer. And unfortunately, that's not my no to give. That's just client policy on their side.
That's a policy question, right?
Exactly. So that's not really, and a lot of people mistake that for, oh, they were being bad recruiter. They didn't want to get back to me. They didn't want to get back to me. But at the same time, how many times can I send the same email that I don't have a say over that? So it can come down to something like that, where it's completely out of our hands. But then on other sides, there will be an email from a recruiter or a call that can come through saying, I don't think you're great for this role, but let me keep your resume on file for when something else does come in with this type of company. What are you looking for? And one of the things that I always would ask a recruiter is, if this doesn't work in the future, like, please reach out if there's something else down the line that sounds similar to this. Or because our job is to not work harder than we have to, right? No one wants to work triple the amount. And why start a brand new search if you have 10 candidates that were perfect for this role but didn't really get through with that client? So I don't want to call it giving it a second chance, but there is kind of always that revitalization aspect to doing that.
would it also be appropriate, kind of riffing on the wording that you provided there, to say, may I contact you again, or may I contact you in a couple of months to see if there's anything else going on, being mindful of the fact that it's 55 calls a day every day, and that person may not be top of mind, even if they kind of shoot through the recruiter's mind at a certain point, they may not have the ability to reach out again to the candidate. So is asking for permission a way of establishing a relationship there?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely ask it in the sense of, hey, do you have an email I can reach out to? Just keep it very casual. I wouldn't ask for permission, of course. I would just more ask if it's okay that you contact them. Because even if you see a job with a company in-house that you don't know if they work with them or not. Jim was great at this, actually, when we were kind of working together, and he would send, oh, if you work with this client, you work with this client. So bringing stuff to recruiters' attention too is going to help you kind of get that in. Again, a personal story. I worked with a candidate back in 2022 when I was first kind of starting. I didn't really understand what her skill set was. She worked with data analytics. Still very unclear with what that is on my side, but she loved it. That's a big thing in HR now. People are starting to use it a lot more. And that's kind of where my specialty was. So a year and a half later, she reached out saying, hey, we spoke about a year ago. Just to remind you, we spoke about this role. And it's things like that where, wow, this girl took the time to remind me, even without me having to go into my system. She took the time to say, hey, we worked on this together. I remember hearing about this on the call, to just kind of jog your memory. So she didn't want to just be that person who said, hey, I want this job, I saw it on your website, but instead tried to make that personal connection in the sense that we did have a personal connection in the past. So that's the right way to do it, of course. Nagging the recruiter 12 times a day, can you sponsor me now? Can you sponsor me now? Can you do this? Can you get me this job? Not the way to do it. So I would even ask for an introductory call with a lot of these recruiters. Hey, do you mind if we just chat? I'd love to get your feedback on my resume, or I'd love to get your feedback on this job I'm working on. They want to just be of service and of help. So that's kind of the right way to look at that. And if they don't have a job now, I think that that's very appropriate to say, okay, I'll reach back out in a month.
Right. Kathleen.
Yeah, and this may be going back to square one, but what generally is the first point of contact with a recruiter, or vice versa? How do you find each other, and what grabs your attention the most?
Sure. I'm a nuts recruiter, I'll say that much. I would go through 25 resumes in an hour and just fire blast text people, call people, kind of be that annoying person in your LinkedIn DM saying, hey, I have a perfect job for you. You'd be great. Answer this right now, kind of thing. That was very early on in my career, but towards the end, you start to realize you have to do a very specialized search. So let's just say, Kathleen, that you are wanting to get into HR, and I'm sorry that I keep talking about this, it's just my specialty, but you're wanting to get into HR, you have a specific software on your resume that I need, right? So on LinkedIn, I will go ahead, or on Indeed or on ZipRecruiter, these are all job boards that a lot of people are familiar with. I will go ahead and search for that one software because that's what my clients want. From there, I always suggest that you put your resume onto LinkedIn, you put your resume somewhere else if you are looking, but make sure that your contact information is accessible, because a lot of the issues with what we had with candidates was the time frame aspect. So we would lose 3 days of potential speed with the fact that we had to wait for their resume to come through on LinkedIn. So I have to do a search regardless of that. That's how I would find a candidate. The other way I find a candidate is if there's a personal referral. So a lot of the times I would get candidates in the past who said, hey, I got a job. Thanks so much for your help. My friend now needs your help because she can't get a job with this, or he can't get a job with this. So there's that aspect too with the referral. If you as a candidate are looking for a recruiter, there's a way to go about that. And from my personal experience, it's difficult to get on the phone with them sometimes. A lot of people don't want to talk to you unless they have a job open. And that can kind of stem from, as we go back to it, their salary structure at the end of the day, if they are only commission based. However, if you are looking for a specific job, I suggest following the company on LinkedIn. I suggest following a recruiting company that focuses on your wheelhouse. Companies have to do industry focused searches. So if you're looking for something in finance, if you're looking for something in HR, there will be a recruiting company that has that. And that's kind of where the easiest way for you to be would be. So I don't know what kind of industry you're in specifically, but what do you focus on?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yes.
Okay, that's a really good question, as John knows. I did do my Ikigai exercise, by the way. There's several different things, but my profession is as an educational psychologist.
Okay.
A psychologist,
So,
but I'm not necessarily looking in that again, so.
okay. I mean, of course, but at the same time, you could be a perfect fit for an educational software that they're testing on young kids, right? So
Yes, exactly.
it's things like that where you'll never know who has what job open, and the best thing to do is establish, communication with 5 to 6 recruiters. Just because you saw that they post something on LinkedIn, just because you saw that that company did that. So, for example, I worked with a marketing company. They focused on educational software. They were looking for people to test that out. I would never have known that I would ever work on an educational search like that, right? So it's such a gambit, but there will be either in-house opportunities. So if you think of 10 softwares that on that side, or anything, like I'm just using the education as an example right now, but the 10 on that side, you can follow that page on LinkedIn and see what happens there. Job posters will sometimes put their name and their profile up on the job. I would always connect with them if you apply to the job that way, or just try and open the conversation there. The other aspect is going to be working with like an agency like Robert Half or the company I was with, which was the Backtrack Group. They may have something open, or they may know of someone who has something open. So it's all about, which door should I open first?
And what is the likelihood of you actually giving attention to someone who has come to you through a personal referral versus someone who contacts you, in a flurry of candidates whom you do not know? It seems to me that the personal referral is going to get the priority, not by any intent on your part, but it just happens that way. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it depends. If someone reached out to you on LinkedIn, sent you an email, their recruiter, they were looking for your profile. So I think that that's as equal of an opportunity as if your friend is friends with someone at a recruiting company or an in-house. We see those referrals being much more beneficial when they are in-house. So if you have someone working at that company already and they say, oh, hey, I have this friend, Kathleen, she's great, she's done this in the past, that's where that referral is going to matter a lot more. On the agency side, so specific for what they are looking for, but the referral is always someone that you should talk to, is the way I want to put that.
Okay, thank you.
Does that clarify that?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm.
I want to drill back to something you were saying. I want to make sure I understand this. In terms of developing a relationship or reaching out, nurturing a relationship with a recruiter whom you don't know, what you're saying is if you're looking for a particular job, you see a particular job, there's a recruiter identified, that even if that job is already filled or you're not right for the job, developing a relationship with that recruiter may lead to other jobs because that's the area that they're in.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that goes back to kind of the story I was telling you earlier, which was I never thought I'd place this girl, but then I had a job open for her a year and a half later, and she just happened to reach out because she saw a post. So you never know what kind of connection it will be. And I always say, try and just get on the phone. I was always taught to try and just get on the phone with candidates, talk to as many people as you can, network with as many people as you can. And that's where all of those connections are going to stem from.
Right. So if you take kind of like a peer attitude where we're both trying to solve the same problem, which is to fill the position, right? I'm trying to fill the position with myself. You're trying to fill the position with someone. We have this shared interest. Let's team up. Exactly.
And that's where that whole transparency relationship comes in, and the teammate and the handholder and the advocate, that's where that relationship is going to benefit the strongest.
Right. So in other words, help the recruiter help you.
Mm-hmm.
As
Yeah.
opposed to, as you say, being the nag. It's like, what do you got? What do you got? What do you got? Right. I like to say, don't lead with your need. So,
Yeah, don't be desperate. That's the other thing is you can't, I hate to put it this way, but you cannot show your desperation to people. I need this job tomorrow. Like, I need it. I need it. That's a huge issue on multiple fronts.
Hey, just to kind of by that makes me think about every once in a while I'll see a post on LinkedIn where someone will complain. Someone will be the victim. I just got turned down. I haven't worked in a year, and I get and this kind of complete sob story, and it gets amazing traction. People are always responding, oh, I feel so bad for you. Yes, it sucks out there. Employers are nasty, recruiters are nasty, this and that. You're better than that. I mean, all of this stuff. And in the past, I've tried to kind of peek in and say, hey, I understand that you're hurting here, but LinkedIn may not be the best place to share this, because aren't you trying to reach the people that aren't you going to get hired by the people who keep turning you down? So this is kind of counterproductive. And people just pile on me going, you're insensitive to this person. All she's trying, and I just back away. But what do you think? I mean,
hey, I 100% agree with you. I think that's like posting a solo cup on your Instagram right before you're going to college, right? That is a red flag. People check your LinkedIn. People have to look at it. And if I want to send your profile to my client, they're going to look. They're going to see that. So keep it as PC as possible, as we like to say. It's actually something that we all would joke about. And of course, we have so much compassion for people who have not worked in a year. But at the same time, you read through these posts and it's people who have unrealistic expectations for what they actually want in a job. They want a job that will let them work 20 hours a week but get paid 40, or they want a job that will let them live in a different state from where the job is hiring, even though that job said that it was hybrid. So it's everything tacked onto it. It's kind of a joke in the community, but it's okay to let out your frustration. But I agree, I would not do that on a public professional platform such as LinkedIn.
What are some other best practices around keywords and ways of getting yourself noticed in search? And are there best practices between headline, about section, experience section? Does the algorithm care about that? Or is it just, as long as it's on the profile, you're going to get searched?
Yeah, you want to make your profile as thorough as possible. So from day one, I was taught that recruiting and finding a job is like dating. You want your profile on whatever dating app, or in this case LinkedIn, you want it to be complete with who you actually are. You don't want to have to hold anything back on there. You don't want to know on the second date that person doesn't like spicy food. You want to know what kind of software they have. So you, again, transparency is the biggest thing in this industry. And I know it's kind of funny that it's just like dating, but you want everything listed on there. And if, for example, I know that Rebecca earlier had asked how long should my resume be? You want to put whatever is on your resume onto LinkedIn. You want it to be an exact match. And of course, you want your contact information on there. About section, I will tell you, I've never once read that, but some people like to have a long about section. I would make sure you have a professional photo, of course, not one from your high school catalog years and years ago. I don't even have one from when I graduated college 3 years ago. So it's things like that where you want it to be an accurate representation of what you are in that moment or in the past 5 years. We see a lot of people with like photos where they've zoomed in from a Facebook photo where they thought they looked really good with their friends, but then it's just not appropriate for that photo. And that can also be a turnoff to a recruiter. People who just put their job but don't have any context to the job that they did, don't ever put their promotions in there, even if they were promoted 5 times at the same company. You really want it to be an exact mirror replicate of your resume.
Right. We're kind of wrapping up into the final few minutes. Any other tips and tricks that you either shared with candidates, never got the chance to share with candidates, would love to share with candidates that we can benefit from in your experience?
Sure. I'll give you kind of a horror story, but and then this will go off of everything else. Of course, you need to think like the other person on the other call. It's a little tricky when you're obviously so focused on what you need to do for yourself in that moment, but thinking about the right words to say, thinking about how to kind of mimic whatever they have emotionally, that's something that's very important. So within my first 2 months of recruiting, I sent someone on a final interview. It was a Zoom with their director of HR. He had naked photos in his Zoom background. So great, right? Super professional. Final round interview, blew it because of that. So again, thinking about these little things. No one ever would have thought that your Zoom background would be something that is important. However, it does need to be basic, professional. This is just my biggest thing, feedback with people. Making sure that you know how to work Zoom, making sure that you know how to work Microsoft Teams. I always suggest taking it from a computer if you have access to one. And of course, if you don't, a phone is okay too. But it needs to be the most decluttered, basic background that you have. This person did not get the job, obviously, and it was even very awkward feedback for the client to give me. We were not allowed to work on that job anymore after that. So it can kind of, take away a lot of anyone's authenticity, but I do highly recommend, being cognizant of that side. It used to be just make sure you wear a nice shirt, make sure your hair is done, but now it's also becoming, make sure you think about what that other person is going to see, make sure you think about what the other person is going to hear. Being very aware of your presence, this also can go back to that LinkedIn post, making sure that you're not upsetting anyone, making sure that you're not bringing up anything politically on a call. That can be one thing. Unless it is offered to you, that's kind of the best way that I say that. I'm trying to think if I have anything else that we had happen that was just so out of the world crazy, but common sense, that's not that.
I think it's interesting you talk about the background, because I've been advising people to not use a virtual background because I think it just goes back to the transparency question. What are you hiding? Mm-hmm. Right? So again, as you're saying, simple background, a real background, a real location, it just helps sell the reality of who you are as the candidate, as opposed to, I wonder what's, it's a distraction. What's behind that picture of the Taj Mahal? What's really there? What's the room really like?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the other thing too is I worked with a lot of students coming straight out of college, and they would have all of their dorm clothes, stacked high over here, and like a bong in the background and a bottle of alcohol in the background of it.
Nice.
That's cool. You can do that on Friday, but it's a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. So, kind of taking feedback like that, not to heart, but more of people do have your best interest in mind. And as funny as it can be to all of us on the call, and everyone else is, haha, that's hilarious, that's so 21 of him. But you have to think professionally in so many of these situations. And we're just seeing a lot of slip up with the, it's a virtual interview, it doesn't really matter. But that's kind of just something that we do get a lot of feedback from clients, is the virtual presence.
Any other tips for people who are perhaps older and feeling a little bit awkward with the virtual interview framework as ways of coming across more relaxed or more engaged? Or the panel interview on Zoom can be very intimidating to a lot of people, and a lot of sweating going on around having 6 people there all kind of staring at you and listening to your answer to that awkward question. So how can you better prepare for this?
Sure. I understand the panel side, right? I felt that today a little bit of, who's going to ask something? What's someone going to say? Everything like that. If you do work with a recruiter, if you do have someone who's tech savvy, if you are not tech savvy yourself, ask to do a practice run through. That'll help everyone. That way, that's how I found out that kid partied 5 minutes before he got on the call. That's how I found out that person had dishes behind him. You want to make sure that they're doing everything that they can to help you, and it's not just oh, good luck here, go take the interview, bye. That also should be standard practice for you, right? So you should have that relationship with the recruiter where they want to help you prepare for the interview to the utmost of their ability. I also think that maybe having someone, if it's not a recruiter, having, you know, as I said, someone run through stuff with you, showing up 5 minutes before just so you can make sure that your headphones are connected, that you can hear everything. You don't want to do that at 11:59 and when the interview's at 12. You want to do that at 11:55, 11:53. You want to show up prepared, and you don't want to show up last minute prepared.
Right.
So give yourself kind of a 5-minute buffer and a little practice.
Right. All right. Any last question? One more question for Carly, and then we're gonna sign off. Anyone have?
I have a quick question.
Yes, Katie.
So I heard yesterday that someone said if your picture on LinkedIn isn't 1 to 2 years old, it should be updated. I don't know what you're feeling. Theory. Mine's old, but I don't think I'm just curious. Some people say if it's more than 5 years old, it should be updated, which I could understand, but 1 to 2 years old?
I think that comes down to your personal preference. I don't think I'll see a difference in someone in 1 to 2 years, except for someone like a college student like myself, where my LinkedIn photo used to be me with my graduate stash, and I graduated college, cool. What do I do next? You know, so there's that aspect to it. But if you feel comfortable with your photo from 5 years, that's fine, as long as it's a clear photo of you. You know, I think 5 years is probably the longest amount of time that you'll want to go. But I don't think that you need to update your photo every 1 to 2 years. That could just be someone who
that could be their
taking
personal
more.
opinion.
Yeah. And again, like, this kind of comes down to what John and I were talking about earlier of people are going to post what they want to post on LinkedIn just to get a little bit of a rise, just to get a response, just to get views on their profile. So there's that aspect too, and that could have been kind of a bait post where people wanted you to say 1 to 2 years. I don't do that every 1 to 2 years. But personal preference, but I do suggest 5 years.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I mean, my answer to that would be, you want to be in person, pretty much the person that you are in the picture. So if you still look like your picture and you still present the same way, that's really the point. It's like the dating analogy, right? You don't want to have a dating photo of you from 10 years ago and then show up looking completely different. Or, you know, the other thing that people used to do was older people would put pictures of their kids in their dating profile. So they would, I mean, crazy stuff was going on.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Anyway, on that note, Carly, thank you so much for braving the panel here.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope we were okay.
Oh, of course. And if you guys have any further questions, I'm happy to give my email to John so he can send it to you guys. And I can help with resumes. I can help with LinkedIn profiles, anything on that side.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for showing up on the call. We will see you again next month, and have a great month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Carly.
Thank you, everybody.